Welcome to our training on coping with labor. I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm excited to talk to you about all the different ways you can cope with labor and have an unmedicated birth if that's what you want to have. Even if you're planning to have an epidural, I think it can be really useful to learn how to cope with labor for a few different reasons. One of which is that every once in a while, an epidural will not work or it'll only numb like one half of your body. This is really rare and nothing to be afraid about, but it's important to have tools to be able to manage sensations in labor just in case that were to happen. Also, it's really ideal to get an epidural a lot later in labor if you can, like well into active labor. People who get an epidural at the very early stages of active labor, so at the very really beginning of the real thing, sometimes that can cause labor to slow down a little bit. So it's great to be able to cope as long as you can. Also, if you're planning to birth in the hospital, an evidence-based way to reduce your risk for cesarean is to labor at home as long as possible. So if you're able to cope with labor well at home with tools, that's going to help you to be able to labor at home well into you're feeling like, okay, now I actually need some support. It's time to go to the hospital, and that will decrease your risk for cesarean. So there are a few different branches, like different perspectives I like to take and different paths we can look at for coping with labor. And I first want to start at the very beginning, which is with emotional preparation, which I find is the most important step we can take because birth is so mental. When we go into labor feeling calm and we feel confident, we're believing in ourselves, we have a good team of people that are supporting us and respecting us. In that kind of environment with that kind of mental framework, it's so much easier to surrender and relax in the presence of contractions. And that's really the foundation of coping with labor. It's your ability to be able to relax in the presence of contractions and say yes when a contraction happens. When we have fear, what can happen sometimes is that we are experiencing the fear at the same time that we're experiencing the contraction, right? And so that can be really overwhelming to be going through an experience where we're like, oh, I'm having like a lot of fear in the presence of these contractions in addition to the intensity of the contraction. So we're dealing with emotional stuff and contractions. We can go into a process called the pain, fear, tension cycle. So that means we have fear in the presence of a contraction. And because of that fear, we choose to tighten up, right? Like we choose to resist in the presence of the contraction. When we're resisting, we tighten our muscles, and by tightening the muscles, not only can that make the contraction more painful and uncomfortable because we're resisting it, it also can lead to tension that we're holding in the musculature around the pelvis and in the pelvic floor. And when we're holding tension, what can happen is that the baby's trying to come through and they're being held back by all this tension, and that can also potentially contribute to the development of a positioning issue, which is something we definitely want to avoid. I'd like to offer you a different way to view your contractions that can perhaps be more supportive for your mental framework. And what that is to embrace your contractions, recognizing that your contraction is created by your body to help your baby come into the world, and that you and your contraction have the exact same goal, which is to get your baby out. Contractions are created by oxytocin, which is the love hormone. Love, like the feeling of love, is experienced in our body through the body releasing oxytocin. So we can't like experience love in the same way without oxytocin. So oxytocin is love. And our oxytocin that we're releasing is created by us. So it's our love for our baby that is creating the contractions to bring our baby through. So if you look at it that way, you can recognize that this whole experience is something that your body is orchestrating perfectly, that your body was made to do it, and it's all created as this one big expression of love for your baby to bring your baby into the world. Your body releases oxytocin to have the contraction, and then it releases endorphins. And the endorphins are pain-killing chemicals. Every time your body releases more contractions and the intensity increases, you get more endorphins. So in that way, your body cannot release a contraction, like you can't experience a contraction that you can't handle, because every contraction is perfectly crafted to be supportive enough for you to be able to handle it. I've heard so many birth stories, right, where like the person said that like I had the worst pain ever. It was excruciating. I felt like super out of control. And oftentimes when I hear those stories, if we were to unpack and kind of look back at like why that mom had that kind of experience, I'm able to find a few different things probably happened. One is that she had Pitocin, and Pitocin is the synthetic form of oxytocin. It can be given to help speed up labor or induce labor sometimes. Pitocin can make your contractions more painful. And the reason why is because it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. So like I said, you have this normal hormonal feedback loop that's happening to help give you pain-killing chemicals to cope with contractions. When you have Pitocin, that feedback loop is skipped over. And so you're getting the contractions, which are artificially simulated, and you're not getting the same level of endorphins that you would in a naturally stimulated contraction. And so many people get Pitocin. So that is one reason why I think so many people say that birth is like the most excruciating thing ever, and they just experience like all this pain and nothing else. Like some moms experience pain, but they also experience pressure. They experience feelings of their heart opening. They have spiritual experiences. Like there are all these like really beautiful things we can experience during birth. But when we're in an environment that isn't really supportive of our autonomy, isn't really respectful of our preferences, isn't like personalizing our care to us, or maybe we're just routinely getting Pitocin and everyone around us is expecting us to be in pain, it's harder to tap into some of those other kinds of sensations and experiences when you're in an environment where everyone's expecting you to experience pain. And another reason is because a lot of people feel fear when they go into birth. And we go into birth hoping for the best, which isn't really the best model. And it's not your fault that the standard medical model is not super supportive around personalization. They don't take a holistic approach. That doesn't mean that if you're birthing in the hospital that your experience won't be good. You can have an amazing experience in the hospital, but to be able to cope with labor in the hospital and have an unmedicated birth, it's really important that when you go in, you are choosing to create a personalized experience for yourself, which means you've learned how to advocate, which means you've learned the risks and benefits of interventions and what the current research and evidence has to say, because it takes 10 to 20 years for new research and evidence to make its way into policy. So that doesn't mean you're always going to get the best evidence-based care at the hospital. And all that really means is that if you want to get the best evidence-based care, you just have to like know what the research and evidence says and then say, yes, please, I want this thing, and no, thanks, I don't want that thing. And advocacy is very, very simple. And this does like connect to pain in labor, because when we feel out of control, when we feel like things are happening to us, when we feel bullied into doing something we don't want, we'll absolutely end up going down a path that is more intense or unpleasant, which can definitely impact the way you experience contractions. Because like I said before, birth is very, very mental. So much of what we experience comes from the mind and from our emotional state. So creating an environment where you feel really supported, where you feel calm and you can make choices in alignment with your values, you feel safe and connected to your partner or birth team, that environment is going to be so much more supportive for you being able to actually have the unmedicated birth that you're wanting to have, if that is what you want to have. I can teach you how to do all of this in my coaching program. If you guys want to, I just opened up this new thing where you can join for a week for $47. So just send me a message if that's something you want to do. Let's talk about some other tools that you can use for coping with labor. There are lots of different tools that you can use. One of them is a TENS unit. And a TENS unit is a device. It's like a little handheld device. There are fancy, expensive wireless ones you can get, or you could just get one on Amazon for like $30. Basically, it sends, like you take these little sticky pads and you stick them on your lower back, and it sends signals through your spine to your brain. And there are two different ways that it works. I highly recommend you get one if you're wanting an unmedicated birth. Please get one. It's such a great tool to have. You might not use it, but if you do use it, it'll be like, oh, thank God I had this. So it sends signals into your brain. On the low setting, it tricks your brain into, it's something called the gate control theory. Or is that what it is? I think so. So it means that basically you can't process the pain from the contraction and the pain from, or it's not pain, but like the signal that's your brain's interpreting as pain at the same time. It's too confusing. So your brain just picks one and it will make the contractions less painful. The other one that you can try is moving it to a high setting. And on the high setting, what that does is it sends like more signals to your brain, telling your brain that you're in pain, even though you're actually not in pain there. and your brain will release more endorphins, which will like reduce the pain of your contractions. This is an evidence-based tool that you can use to reduce pain scores. It's a really great tool. You can't use it in the water is the only thing, but otherwise it's safe. You know, there are no risks to it. So the next tool that I want to teach is the use of positions with a partner or with a doula. And these two positions are super, super helpful. I'm actually going to use my more ugly but mobile pelvis, because my white one isn't as mobile, to show you how this not only can benefit your contractions feeling more comfortable, but also benefit the progression of labor so your baby can move through your pelvis faster. So there are two different things you can do. One is called counter pressure. So with counter pressure, your partner or doula will take their hand and they'll put their hand directly on your lower back, and the sacrum is right here. So they want to basically cup the sacrum with their hand, push this way. And what that does when they're pushing directly this way is it's actually expanding like the sacrum just a little bit, which is kind of cool. I'm on Instagram Live so people can see this too. And that can help open the pelvis a little bit. And the feeling of pressure like right there on your sacrum can feel so good. Typically what this looks like how you would do it, is you would be, let's say in hands and knees, leaning over a birth ball, and you would be during contractions, like rocking back and forth probably. Someone could take their hands and put it on your lower back, right over your sacrum, and push directly there and just do a slight lift up to help tilt the sacrum up a little bit. And then they would just rock with you. The other one that you can do is called the double hip squeeze. And so this is where you'd find, like if you feel someone's low back, you could find where these two bones up here are kind of sticking up. And so you would take hands like this, not you, but partner or doula, you know, would take hands so the hands are pointed with fingers together. So it'll look like this. And so your sacrum is that diamond kind of shape that'll be right in between their hands and their fingers. And they'll just push down and together and lift up slightly. And what that does when we lift up slightly, we're also helping to open the pelvis just a little bit. Labor progression is also like really tied to the sensations that you experience, whether you're experiencing pain or discomfort or intensity or pressure, whatever it is. Typically, if your baby is in an ideal position, labor will be much less uncomfortable. So doing some of these positions can really help to have your baby be in a good position. I want to take that thought and move forward with it because that's a really important thing to be aware of. So when it comes to like the position of your baby, when it comes to addressing labor, like coping with labor, what I find is really supportive is to do two things to prepare to reduce your risk of experiencing unnecessary pain. Because sometimes we experience pain that really isn't necessary and can be avoided due to positioning issues or the fear, pain, tension cycle. So for the fear, pain, tension cycle, working on your emotional state and preparing emotionally and mentally is helpful. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Right now, I want to talk about preventing pain from a positioning issue. So what is a positioning issue? That is when the baby comes through the pelvis in a non-optimal way. Typically what happens when babies are going through the pelvis is that I'll go this way, is that they engage in the pelvis. And when they engage, they tuck their chin to their chest like this. When they engage. So they engage in like kind of a tucked position, and that helps them to engage and move through the pelvis in a good way. When the baby's head, like when they want to extend their head like this, this can happen. It's really not ideal because it can be a lot harder for baby to move through the pelvis this way than this way. So there are some things you can do in early labor to try to encourage baby to tuck into the pelvis in a good way. And I have a whole formula for that. And maybe I'll make a post in school about that later because that's a little too off topic. But when baby goes through, they just go through like straight during the active labor phase. And then near the end of labor, they do something called an internal rotation. So they're facing the side and then they turn to face the back. So I'll show you without the pelvis. There we go. So they're engaging in the pelvis, they tuck their chin, and then they just turn like this during labor, and then they come out. Sometimes what can happen is that babies are doing their best to work their way through the pelvis the best way that they can, and they know how to do these positions. But every once in a while, a baby will be faced with some tension in one side of your pelvic floor or the other side potentially. And so they're trying to compensate for the lack of space that they have. We typically, as people in the West, like sit a lot, we cross our legs a lot. We're not like squatting, like foraging, walking up and down hills. Like we're not super active typically. And in pregnancy, it's not really that most ideal time for someone to be like, I'm going to start exercising a ton, because you're exhausted probably. And it's not like, unless you were already exercising a lot. I just see a lot of moms like feel really guilty and bad for not like running on a treadmill all the time when you're pregnant. So just know, like, you don't have to get super active to prevent a positioning issue. What I do recommend you do is something called the spinning babies. And if you're in my school group, go to the spinning babies lesson in the birth class. I actually just made a whole video on spinning babies, and I'm going to post that in the school community too. So probably today or tomorrow. So you can see that. And I highly recommend you watch that lesson, because I'll go deeper into how to do the spinning babies. But basically, there are 3 positions you can do at the end of your pregnancy, around 32 weeks on. And it would be really ideal to do this every day. It's called the 3 Sisters of Balance. And if you do those 3 positions, they help to stretch and create more space in the musculature that surrounds the pelvis. And that is the number one best thing you can do to prepare for an unmedicated birth, right next to preparing emotionally. It's like we want to prepare emotionally to not hold tension, and we want to prepare our body physically to not have tension, because tension is the thing that gets in the way. Tension is the thing that makes labor more painful. So if we want to help to make labor be as smooth as possible and reduce any risk of unnecessary pain, we want to prepare our body with this gentle, like just doing the stretches, like light movement every day. You don't have to like go to the gym all the time. Also prepare yourself emotionally.